All right, awesome. So I see, wow, so we are at almost 200 people here, which is great. I want to welcome everybody. My name is Meenakshi Wadhwa, and I'm Director of the School of Earth and Space Exploration here at Arizona State University. And I want to welcome you all here to this very special session of Ask Me Anything with astronaut Cady Coleman. That I'm sure many of you have already, some have already been submitted, and I know that there'll be some live questions that we'll be taking as well. As you all know, we're in the midst of some very challenging circumstances right now. All of us adults are working from home, and the kids are studying from home, and you know, sometimes makes for kind of stressful circumstances. So we wanted to do something fun for the families of our staff and faculty here in the School of Earth and Space Exploration and the Interplanetary Initiative. And so I want to thank you know, everybody who was able to help support us in terms of being able to do this. And of course, most of all, I want to thank Cady, who very generously offered to do this Ask Me Anything session. So thank you, Cady, for being here. And I want to give you a very sort of brief introduction before we get going. So astronaut Cady Coleman, she is trained as a chemist and an engineer, and she joined NASA in 1992. And she's flown in space 3 times, 2 shuttle missions and 1 6-month trip to the International Space Station. And she retired from NASA in 2016. She's been with us here at ASU as our Global Explorer in Residence since last year, and so we're really, really fortunate to have her here to share in her perspectives and experience and be able to learn from her. So welcome, Cady, and we'd love to hear from you.
Well, thanks. I did promise Taryn we would do a little, like, you know, sort of Zoom important kinds of things. I don't know if you want to go over them or.
Yeah, no, I can sort of do a little bit of the housekeeping stuff to start out with. So obviously, you know, we're going to be doing this in a Zoom webinar format. So what I'd like to ask is that if you have any questions, please submit them in the Q&A part, and I'm going to try to pick from some of the questions that were submitted to us previously, as well as a mix of the questions that we get live here. And for the best viewing, of course, at home, please switch to presenter view in the upper right corner of your video screen. And we're going to be recording this webinar for you know, people that want to check in later. So that's just some housekeeping that I wanted to go through really quickly. So we're just gonna, you know, we've already got done here with our welcome and comments. Cady's gonna go ahead and present now. So, and hopefully we can do a lot of questions after.
I'll try to be quick. And then let's see. You know, I just want to say that it's such a pleasure for me to be here. I stopped on Minnie's slide. I think leadership is so important, and I've really just enjoyed leadership under Lindy and again with Minnie. And you know, it's a really special place that you have there. You know, I'm part of it as well, but the School of Earth and Space Exploration, I mean, I'm working there because I think that what you're doing is so important, and I think that what ASU is doing, and it's just, you know, life outside ASU, it's just not the same, and it's what keeps me coming across the country. And I think that the work, you know, both the scientific work and, you know, the fact that you are growing the future of people who are going to explore, and today we're hopefully growing even younger folks into becoming explorers as well. It's in my purpose in being here isn't so that everybody wants to be astronauts, because then the line for me would be very long, right? but I, you know, I'm hoping that you'll see a little bit about what, you know, I think was really exciting about my job, and that I'm, you know, I have things that I'm good at, I have things that I'm not good at, and you'll realize that the things that are fascinating to you, you know, they're really, really important for you to pursue. So I'll skip all the little slides there, and I'm just going to show, I mean, probably for about 10 minutes, just some slides just to kind of show you. I mean, many of you have seen, you know, some of this before, but I just wanted to share so we're all kind of coming from the same place. that I flew twice on the shuttle, as Minnie said. And on my first mission, this is the launch of my first mission, I think you can actually see my mouse on the screen. Is that true? I think you can. That
Yeah,
my
you
mouse
can.
is right there on the, what an easy pointer. My mouse is right there on the windows in the shuttle, and I was sitting under one of those windows on my first mission, and we can't really see out the window because we're on our backs, looking sort of straight up towards the sky. But I have a mirror on my knee board, on my sort of clipboard on my knees, and I can actually look out that window and I could see with the big clouds. Just suddenly the clouds are going really small, and the blue sky is turning black, and it's the most amazing feeling, I think, except for the day when someone actually calls you and says, do you still want to work for NASA and be an astronaut? Actually launching into space is the most amazing feeling for me. I like to show this picture. That was a space shuttle. I flew twice on the shuttle, and I feel a little kinship actually with many of the professors and faculty and staff in CC, because I also got to launch on one of those missions, the Chandra X-ray Observatory, which is the telescope that helps us understand a lot that we know about black holes. And I'm clearly not an astronomer. I'm originally a chemist, but to be part of a mission like that, and most importantly, to be part of a mission where, when we launched it, that idea was thought up by people like, I'm talking to the kids, like your parents, like your moms and your dads, and people that they worked with. It was thought up 25 years before we launched it. These things take time. And there has to be a certain sort of belief that, like, if we build this X-ray telescope, we're going to be able to see these things that are so important to us. And now we're, seeing black holes, photographing black holes, understanding more about gravitational waves, and a lot of that knowledge comes from Chandra. So I was really proud to be on the team, but also to understand really what vision is important. And I think you'll see that being somebody who can tell the story of this telescope that needs to be born, or pictures or images, everyone on the team is really, really important. So that's another just image of the shuttle and what it's about. I'll just go back to the station for a minute. I love this picture because actually there's only 3 people. This is the space station. There's many of us that have been and lived on the space station. I say many, but it's a few hundred. But there are there's only 3 that have actually seen this picture where we have the shuttle and the station together. And that's because as I undocked to land after my 6-month mission, we actually sort of went around the Earth again with the space station after we undocked in our little bitty Soyuz. And I got to take these pictures of the station and the space shuttle together. It was right before the end of the shuttle mission. And I think it's really important sometimes to take pictures of things that you've done that are really hard, whether that's a homework that you did that you're proud of, a drawing, or, for your parents, different things that you've done at work, and put them on your desk, put them on your coffee table, and really celebrate them. So, and this is again a picture from the Chandra launching, where here's the Chandra X-ray telescope. You don't see it, but it's in the back of the payload bay. And the other reason that mission was very famous was, I'm the one on the right there. I was not the reason the mission was famous, but right in the middle is Eileen Collins. She's the first woman commander of the space shuttle. And together, our team of 5 launched the space shuttle, the Chandra X-ray Observatory. But I want to talk mostly about what it was like to really live up in space, not just a 16-day mission for doing experiments on my first mission. I'm originally a chemist, a scientist, and not the 5-day mission, really, really short, to launch the Chandra, which was the largest and the heaviest thing we'd ever brought to space on the space station. But my thought as I landed from both of those missions was, what are we doing? Why are we launching, or why are we landing so soon when there's so much work to do up there? And I really loved being a part of that. Here's our group of 3. We go up there in the Soyuz. It's a really small, tiny little craft, kind of like I think what you think of when you think about going to space, where it's about the size of the tiniest smart car. And there's 3 of us inside there, and we have kind of a little part that's for fuel and a little part on the other side that is for docking to the space station, but it's a pretty small little place. And this is how tiny it is inside. And then, but the space station itself, I mean, this is paradise. So here's the space station laid out on a football field. And I'm not worried about you knowing the numbers below about how big, how fast, how high. It's more getting a feel for what if you lived there? You wouldn't live in the place that's sort of long from goalpost to goalpost. You would actually live in the place that's right along the 50-yard line there. And it's like having, each module is like a train car without the seats in it. And so we live in the place where there's like 10 train cars all strung together, one after the other, and yet some of them are up and some of them are down. And it's really just this magical, magical place. When we get there, there's already 3 people there. So now we're a group of 6. And it's like when you're in school and you work in groups, you probably don't get to pick those groups, and we don't get to pick them either. And we have a mission to do, and we have to figure out how to do it together. And this little movie, it's about 1.5 minutes long, but it shows us sort of marching off and reporting in, climbing up the stairs into a tiny, tiny elevator. And now we're inside that rocket, the 3 of us, launching into space from Russia in a Russian Soyuz capsule. That's me waving. And here we are coming in to dock with the space station. It's like this really boom, there we are. And that's my favorite part right there, where you see me flying through the space station. If you look at our robot, you saw a little tiger right at his neck. We're doing experiments. This is our dinner table. Notice that it's not flat. And you know, we're people. I like to play the flute, so I brought some flutes up there. There's other people who brought other instruments, people who brought their paints and paintbrushes, people who have other hobbies. My friend Karen likes to sew, and she made like a little toy dinosaur for her son, and made some quilts up there. And also people on the ground made squares of quilts too, and together when she got home, they made that quilt together. It's really amazingly, astonishingly beautiful, and the view is amazing. Many of your, I think all of your parents were, I saw them when I was up there because they were born. And when I looked down, I saw them. It's always nice to think of the places that you're kind of from. I'm from Massachusetts, but my grandparents are from Ireland. So that's kind of home for me. And here's another view of that space station where you see that it's kind of like up and down at the same time. So a couple more slides of like the experiments that we do there. Turning off one of my devices that's been making noise in the background here. Sorry about that. Let's see if it'll actually turn off. There we go. So this is Scott Kelly up there with, if you look closely, you'll notice that it's lemons and oranges and tomatoes. When they send a supply ship up, they always think about what we'd like to have. And I think Scott Kelly was kind of lucky because on our mission, they sent us actually onions and pickles as our fresh fruit. So we were like a little bit discouraged about that, but I actually do like pickles, and I like to have onions in food, not just by themselves. But actually our Russian friends, that is like one of their favorite things to do, is to eat an onion, believe it or not. I never quite got over that for me. But this is one thing that makes you understand how fun it is up in space. These are gummy bears. It's really, really, really fun. Now I like to show that actually twice, just because I want you to realize that I'm a scientist and I didn't know the gummy bears would be so good. I brought some gummy worms, I brought some gummy bears, some gummy fish. I think they were Swedish fish, but the gummy bears were definitely the best and the most fun. But when we're up there, I showed you those kind of funny videos because I want you to understand that we are really trying to understand things about Earth, but we're going to space to do it. And it's because we don't have, it's not that we have no gravity. We say zero gravity, but it's really just that we have very little gravity. And without the big force of gravity, we can see and measure different kinds of things. And as a scientist, those are fascinating experiments to me. Like, for example, down here on the ground, I would love to know, what do liquids really want to do? But gravity, we know that what that's going to be. I mean, if we pour something out of a glass, it's going to be on the ground down here on Earth. But up in space, the tiny, tiny little forces that really say what liquids want to do, they're the biggest game in town. And we get to understand more about them because they're easier to measure without gravity being in the way. It's the same for plants. It's not that, I mean, we do want to understand how to grow plants in space. We want to understand how to bring food to Mars. If I'm going to go to Mars, and actually you are more likely to go to Mars, it looks like Minnie is already on Mars, then we're going to want to have food. And it turns out that the lessons that we learn in order to understand that are really good for growing plants here on Earth, for doing things like farming in cities, because we found out, we don't want to use a lot of energy. So we found out how to grow plants without using a lot of energy. We don't have very good soil. So we found out how to grow plants without soil. So those things are good for explorers, and they're also good for Earth. And just, some of the things you might think are really, sort of parts of, what we do all the time. We don't actually do a lot of spacewalking, but we're always ready to do spacewalks. And this was my spacesuit up on the space station. I didn't actually get to go out and pointed about, but it's because we only do spacewalks when we have a plan to do something like rearrange the whole space station, just like when Dr. Minnie's husband was up there. He was part of a plan to do some really huge rearranging of the space station so they could add new pieces and add more power. And in fact, he was part of fixing part of the space station, the solar arrays. And that was really important. That was planned. But the other time we go out is when something breaks. Now, as an astronaut, is it nice of me to wish that something important and dangerous would break so that I could go outside and have a spacewalk? No. Did I hope that a little bit? I hoped for maybe something expensive to break so I could go out and fix it, but none of that happened. So I didn't get to go out, but I was really proud of being up there with a spacesuit and ready to go and do that. And I think I have one more little thing to show you here. We'll talk about robotics maybe during our questions, but I wanted to show you this short video that shows a little bit about living in space. And friends of mine made it. This is astronaut Mike. He's showing us how he washes his hair and how he washes his face. We don't really have a shower. It's kind of, we could have a shower, and I think there's some questions about that. This is how we sleep. We kind of slide like a snake into a sleeping bag, and it's attached to the wall if we want it to be, or we could float around. This is my friend Satoshi. This is Mike. We're doing all sorts of things that we're not necessarily oh, there's the Russians eating onions. Notice that. Big smiles. And this is our window. And we get to look at the Earth, and those are little clouds and the blue of the oceans, because so much of our Earth is made of oceans. Now it looks like Mike and his friends are going backwards, but think about it differently. What if they're still and the space station is moving to the right? So up there, we have to really think about things differently, and even games. Now, Satoshi is a huge, huge baseball fan. He loves baseball. And yet, everybody's busy doing experiments. So Satoshi has to be the pitcher. And then he has to figure out how to bat. Now, as an explorer on the space station, I'm kind of thinking about that flashlight. But he also has to catch. He has to be the catcher. Isn't that great? And he had to be kind of brave to do that, because, it's not easy to make a video like that. And he knew that a lot of people would like watching it. So he made it really just for all of us. Okay, so I'm going to stop here, Minnie, and maybe we'll just start with questions. And I'm going to say, this is our crew of 6. I'm going to say stop sharing. And we'll go back to slides if we need them.
Great. Thank you, Cady. That was amazing. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask a couple of questions here to start. And there's a ton of questions, by the way. There's lots and lots of questions. And so I'm just going to really quickly choose a few to start. One is from Amelia. And she asks, what does it feel like without gravity?
Amelia, to me, it's like delicious. I mean, I really loved being there. I'm not that coordinated on the ground, and I could like do flips and somersaults, and with there's a video you can look up on the internet. It says splitting hairs and gravity, and it's about taking like one little hair from my head, like it was dental floss or something. And if I took that one hair and I pushed very gently, like on the edge of my computer, it would push me across the whole space station. And so it's just like being Peter Pan. It's delightful.
All right. The next question actually is from Drew. And he asks, what is it like to adjust to gravity when you get back to Earth?
Drew, it's Well, it's a little disappointing to come home in some ways. I really loved living on the space station. And I loved the work that we did up there. I wanted to do more. But when you get back, I don't know if you've ever been on a ship, Drew, or on a boat, and you get used to kind of doing this. You're kind of, the boat is doing that. And so you just start naturally doing that. And then once you get on the ground, well, the ground is still, but you're still kind of doing this. But for us who were used to moving with so little effort, just like I was explaining to Amelia, then when we're on the ground, it's not just like a little bit of this, it's like, whoomp, whoomp, whoomp. I mean, it's really distracting and it's kind of hard for your head. Many of us are, including me certainly, are nauseous, but we have some really good medicine for that. And so after we take some of the medicine, that really helps us a lot. Take a big nap. After we land, we end up, we're out in the middle of Kazakhstan, in the middle of Russia, and we take a big long helicopter ride to an airport. So we get to do a little bit of napping, and resting is always kind of good when your head doesn't feel great.
Okay, so actually getting back to space, there's a question here, which Cady, I'm sure you probably heard this before, and you might even have a video to show for it.
Okay.
How do you go to the bathroom in space? And this is a question from Maddie, by the way.
Okay, Maddie, and I'm imagining that there might be other questions out there. In our household, I mean, my kids are grown up now, but you know, this is the way we talk about it, okay? And we talk about pee and poop. And so basically we need these things to go where we want them to go, where it's not going to be messy. And let me just tell you up front, you know, this is really easy. It's easier than on any camping trip. And it's almost kind of fun. But it's really easy, and we have lots of privacy too. Like you saw Mike in his cabin there. We have a bathroom that's actually way bigger than his cabin. I mean, it's big enough for you to be alone. We have a curtain on the side. We also have a curtain on the top, right? And so it's really easy to do. And think about the physics of this. We want everything to go where it wants to go. And I talked to you about giving like a little push, and it would push me away, right? Well, we have to find a way to make everything go where it needs to go. And the way we do that, and I'm looking at all of you, okay? I'm looking you straight in the eyes, and I'm gonna say, do not try this at home. We essentially use a vacuum. We use the force of vacuum. It looks like a vacuum clean. It looks, our way of peeing, it looks like a vacuum cleaner hose with a funnel on the top. You're going to see it in just a minute. And it's not like a vacuum like this, you know, it's like a little gentle breeze is all you need to make everything go where it needs to go. Now for everything else, and then I'm going to show you the video, for everything else, we have what looks like a toilet. And it's like this, and you're going to see that everything is gently being brought in. But you do not want to try this experiment because it's specially designed for space. And I'll explain it a little more. Let me see if I can go to the slides and try my trick. Let's see. First, we do this trick, which is here and here. And then I'm going to try this trick to go straight to the bathroom. Oh, come on. You could do that, right? Let's see if it'll go. That's not the bathroom, but now, not there. We might have to look around for the bathroom here. It's a little, there we go. Okay, except, oh, it is good. It's going to go here. So do you see the little yellow funnel? And I can use my mouse here to show it as well. That little yellow funnel, that's the hose and the funnel for peeing. Now this is where everything yucky goes. Now we don't want to see yucky things, so I used these M&Ms to demonstrate what happens. Now looking down in there where the yellow one's about to go, and I just put the red one, looking down in there, you could notice that it's actually like a baggie down there, and there's holes in the bottom. And that's because of the vacuum that I talked about. We have a fan below, and we want everything yucky, including all the paper and everything, is going to go in there. And we need holes in the bottom of the bag so that we have airflow going down there. And you can see that it's actually kind of going straight through there. Let me see if my thing will do this. There we go. Here's another little view of it. So you can see that things are floating in. They're not sucked in like, woof. Now you see the little red tab at the top. So basically our plastic bag, our bag that everything yucky is going to go in, is sort of stretched over the toilet. And once everything is in there, now that was all very clean in there. I know it looks awful to write your hand in there, but that was was all clean and just candy. But every time we are done, we put a new plastic bag in there. And so it's very clean, which you're seeing right now. And so we stretch the top around the toilet there. And when we're all done and everything's in there, I pull up on that red tab and the top goes, it makes a little tiny thing. And then I can push it down below and it goes bump, 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 bump. It goes down a few layers and we never see it again. Now, for pee, for all the urine that we collect, it's different. That urine goes down that hose. And then it goes through some filters, and then it goes through some more filters, and then it gets treated chemically, and then it comes out and we drink it just a few feet away. Now, I can't see you or hear you, but I know that some of you are like going, oh no, that's terrible. I mean, ooh, but guess what? I have worse news. The worst news is that many of us probably drink recycled pee because it's a wastewater treatment plant. And pee is like 99 point whatever percent great water and a tiny amount of not great stuff. So once we clean it out, it's really easy to clean. It's great to drink. Best water I ever drank. So that's a long answer about the bathroom, Mindy. I mean, sorry, Mindy, but I thought that it was worth spending a little time on. Any follow-up questions, do you think, having seen that?
So there's actually a question about from Allison who says, how do you shower in space?
Well, so Allison, I'll let this kind of continue here. You're just kind of looking at it. Allison, it's possible to shower. I mean, when you think about it, we can have a pipe with a shower head on it, just like you have at home, and water coming through. And we could even maybe have a place that's all, enclosed, and all the water would be there, and maybe a drain that the water's being sucked out into and recycled. It would all work. And then when we're done with our shower, we would have to wipe everything down and make it really clean and dry, so that we don't have any mold or anything. And all that wiping down and cleaning would take a while. And that's time that as astronauts, when we all decided, that's time we don't really want to spend when we can actually get really clean with a washcloth and soap and water. And so that's what we do. But that, being really clean, that is something your parents are in charge of, for those of you that are younger. So whatever decisions they make about how to be clean, that's what you have to go with, okay? Oh, now you see the bags. See the bags? It's a little bag, and so when it's filled with yucky things, then we're just gonna poke it down below, and it goes into a can, and until it gets all full, then we take that can, we put it in our supply ship that is now a trash ship. And we kick it off the space station, and that is actually gonna burn up in the atmosphere. But those of you that are Mars explorers, probably you are gonna store those cans of poop because it makes very good fertilizer. Okay.
All right, Cady, that's wonderful. Hey, one more question here about what it's like to be up in the space shuttle or in the International Space Station. How does it feel to be in a small space for a long time with only a few people? And this is from Mary.
So Mary, I don't know how big your house or your apartment is, but I have a feeling that many people out there right now know a little bit about what that feels like. And to me, it's about finding a way to have your space. I mean, I went to space 3 times, and twice was on the space shuttle. And that's about as big as, just trying to think of a good analogy. One part of it is about as big as your car, as a car, not a smart car, but a car. Where there's front seats, back seats, but the shuttle is actually sort of 2 stories. So it's like a 2-story car where there's the front seat where the pilots are sitting, and the back seats where the mission specialists like me are sitting. And then downstairs is another compartment that's about as big as a bathroom. So that's pretty small, right? And we can, really, it's pretty hard to be alone, but we do that in different ways. One way is that we're very respectful to each other. We do a lot of training together, so we get to understand, what's really important to somebody, and what, does somebody like it when I talk a lot? Does somebody like it when I don't talk too much? Who needs quiet? Who needs a little noise? Who needs to explain their day at the end of the day? We start to learn these things about each other as if we're brothers and sisters. And one way that we kind of create our own little space to be in is we wear some headphones and we listen to music. And when I first went to space, we brought cassette tapes with us. We were allowed to bring 6 of them. And then my second mission, we were allowed to bring CDs. And then on my third mission, we had iPods, but they were very big. And now I think they have, you know, tiny little small iPods and iPads and all those kinds of things up there. But it's about finding a way to have your own space.
Thank you, Cady. That really explains it well. So I have another question here from Carrie Kennedy, and she says, does your sense of taste change in space?
Carrie, some people say that it does, and that we can't really, like, things have to be spicier in order for us to feel like they're spicy. That didn't happen for me and my crew, but I think for some people it did. Mostly, I think as time went on, you know, food is a really comforting thing. And I don't know if you found this now, being at home and being home for a long time, that just kind of, there's some things that just make you feel kind of cozy to eat them. It kind of reminds you of what it was like to eat them when you could go anywhere you wanted. But in general, I didn't we would have lots of bottles of spicy kind of stuff, like a rooster sauce and stuff like that, that we could squeeze out gently and try not to squeeze really hard, because that would be a mess, right? But some people really like to use those things. Our crew, we didn't really.
All right. So let's switch gears just a little bit, Cady, and maybe talk a little bit about some of your preparation and some of the motivations of what you basically, what inspired you to go into space. So we have a few questions here. One is from Serena, and she says, what can I be doing right now as a 13-year-old to prepare me for a future as an astronaut?
Serena, I think, I mean, I know it's going to sound sort of like I'm not really answering your question, but I think being you and realizing that it's valuable to be you. I mean, we're in the middle of a great crisis, this pandemic, and there's a lot of different problems to solve. And lots of different people are becoming part of the problem-solving teams. And because we just plain old have to. I mean, you know, you look around and, you know, in different cities and different places around the country, they don't have this, or they don't have this, or they know they could have this if someone could just ask. And teams are forming, and people, I mean, the stakes are so high, people have to speak up. I mean, because they have this idea, they have an idea they think might help, and they find people that might need to hear it. And realize that that's not just true during a pandemic. You know, all of us are different, and you have ideas that no one else is going to think about. So just being you is really the most important thing. I don't really like it when people say, what should I study? And you should study what you are curious about. Now, I think that does come with this caveat that, you know, if math doesn't seem to be something that you love and that's what you want to do all the time, well, that's okay. But does that mean you don't need math? No. Does that mean you don't need science? I mean, think about this pandemic. I'm always, you know, I'm a chemist, but I'm not this kind of chemist. And, you know, it's really important to be able to understand our world, make decisions for ourselves and our families. So we need science, we need math, you need reading, you need writing to communicate those good ideas. So those are the basics. And then the next thing to study is the thing that you are really curious about. And if you're trying to decide what to work on in a project, then pick the thing that you're excited about, because that's the thing you're really going to sort of figure out what you have to say.
Great. So the next question actually comes from Grace, and she says, what is the hardest thing you overcame and went through before applying to be an astronaut?
Grace, that's actually my middle name. I am officially Catherine Grace Coleman. Although in my case, my mother never calls me Catherine, unless she's like, I've sort of done something that I have to explain, right? And Catherine Grace, then I really have to explain. But it's a really beautiful name. It's my grandmother's name. So I'm happy to answer. There's a whole bunch of things that are challenging. And I know that it's easy to think that somebody who's an astronaut, maybe somebody who's an actress, somebody who's a professor, somebody who you see on TV says, I had this idea and it's saving the world. I think it always seems like they must have always known that they just had to wait until the time came to say, this is my idea, right? Or I'm an astronaut and I must have just kind of like, you know, went around, did things until someone said, Cady, time to be an astronaut. But, and to know which school to go to or which decision to make. But there's a lot of challenges in that. And for me, I would hear about other people and I would think, oh, they would be such good astronauts. They would be a much better astronaut than I would be. And because I would think, oh, they did this and this and this. And I think the way to get around that is to focus on what's the mission. You know, the mission is exploring space. And do I want to be a part of it? Yes, I do. And so if I do, I need to be ready. I need to be ready for opportunity. And that means right now for all of us, lifelong learning.
So the next question is from Anne-Marie, and she says, who was the mentor who had the greatest impact in your career to date?
There are so, I mean, it still happens because I'm somebody that likes to work together. You can ask Minnie. I like to talk to her. I like to get her advice. You know, so I think there's lots of mentors. I'm going to name two. One was in 4th grade, Mrs. Ryder with a Y, suggested, she said, Kate, experiment where you decided not to be shy. Because I didn't used to like to talk or to say what I thought was a good idea or anything, because I just was a little sort of worried about doing that. She goes, have you ever thought of just not being shy and just pretend that you're not shy and see if you like not being shy? And it turned out I liked not being shy. So Mrs. Ryder, that was really important for me in 4th grade. And in 12th grade, Mrs. Opp was a chemist. She wasn't actually the most friendly of high school teachers, but she was completely sure that chemistry was amazing and that we just really had to know it. And then I turned out to really love chemistry, and that's why I studied it.
That's great, Katie. I know teachers can be such an important influence. You know, I feel the same way. I mean, there are definitely some amazing teachers.
And I have college ones too.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's really true.
So the next question is from Evan, and he says, can you describe what training you go through before going into space?
We do all sorts of training, and some of it is amazingly fun. Some of it is really boring. The thing that, which you wouldn't think, but well, you know, I say that, but I'll also tell you, I don't think I've ever really been bored, because even when like we're in this, so we do things like we're always trying to figure out how to simulate being in space. How do we pretend we're in space, and how do we really practice? Because, you know, whenever you think you're going to go and do something, like even our video conference today, you know, and we had a practice yesterday, and on my end, the practice was terrible. You know, my computer didn't work. And I'm like, my computer always works. Oh no. But this is why we practice. And part of what we practice is kind of thinking under pressure and solving problems under pressure. But we're always thinking about what is simulated and what is not. And so some of the things that are amazing to practice are spacewalking. I mean, even though it's the hardest thing that we do, putting on a big giant spacesuit, even though it weighs 300 pounds, and being lowered by a crane into a swimming pool, and there it is, the space station, and you're practicing fixing it. I mean, that's a day when I really feel like an astronaut. But another day that I'm like an astronaut is when I'm sitting at my desk and I'm learning how to learn, and I'm studying how the space station works, how the shuttle works, and how I can do my job better. I learned how to fix things until I was like 48 years old. I didn't know how to, I mean, in our house, when we wanted to fix things, we picked up the telephone, old fashioned, I know, and and someone came. It was usually a guy, right? And they fixed it. Well, on the space station, I was in charge of fixing things. So I had a lot to learn. And I had to ask questions sometimes where they would say, you fix it this way. And I'm like, so can you explain to me in that drawing? I mean, there's triangles and there's squares and there's red things and there's blue things. What's the difference? Like, how do you find the path? And you feel a little, you know, like, oh, I wish I didn't have to ask that question. But you know what? If you're going to be the fixer, you have to ask all your questions. So that's a little bit about training.
Right. Okay. So the next question actually is from Ariane Bertain, and she says, I'd like to go into the Air Force. What did you do when you were there?
Ariane, I was a chemist in the Air Force. And in my family, my dad was in the Navy. And he was a deep sea diver, and he was actually in charge of helping to design the Sea Lab, where this is like almost like a spaceship, but it's underwater, and it's the first time that men lived underwater. So he was in the Navy, and I grew up as a child of a military family, and I really liked the fact that in his job he was doing things that were important for everyone, not just for a few people, but it was some service. And I think that some service is important for everybody. That's part of the reason I joined the Air Force, but you don't have to be in the military to do service. I mean, I think that teachers are service. I think just figuring out, what do I have to give and how can I contribute it? Helping somebody, that is service. Now, in my particular case, the Air Force paid for college because we didn't actually have money for college. And so then our bargain was that I would spend some time in the military. And I was a chemist in the military. I worked on new materials for airplanes, which was really interesting to me, like Kevlar, that stuff that's so strong. It turns out that it's really strong if you pull it, but if you push it, well, then it's like if you had a whole bunch of spaghettis all straight and you pulled them, they're pretty strong. I mean, you could still break them, but if you smush them this way, they're just going to go. Bleh. And it's the same thing with Kevlar. And so I figured out how to make Kevlar stronger. So I did things like that when I was in the military, and then I stayed in the military after I started at NASA.
So actually, I think this is 6-year-old Daisy who's asking this. She says, what does space station smell like?
Ooh, well, Daisy, I don't know if Daisy has brothers and sisters, but it depends on who you're in that space station with, I think. But people always think that maybe our space station smells bad, and it just didn't. I mean, the only time that we do things that could be a little bit smelly is we actually do exercise a lot up there, but we have a whole bunch of clothes for that. And whenever we're done with those clothes, after I was kind of in charge. I was nominated on our crew. I nominated myself, truthfully, on our crew, to say, today is the day. Today is new gym clothes day, because we have a lot of them and we are going to wear them. And I think that nobody really minded that I said that.
Okay. Next question is from Emily Spicer. Okay, next question is from Emily Spicer, and she says, how old do you have to be an astronaut?
There is no particular age to be an astronaut, Emily, and that means there's not a particular age that's too old, and there's not one that's too young. Now, I think that they're picking people that are ready, and they want them to have studied things in school that they really love. And because if we're going to go to Mars, I mean, look around at Earth. We need all sorts of people to be part of the team. Well, same thing for Mars. So we need all sorts of different professions. But right now, when we still don't have that many people that are going, we need people that have really gotten pretty well prepared by doing some studying, but also learning about themselves and how they work in a group. It's an international space station, and so knowing more than one language is a really good idea, I think, because we're probably not going to go to space just one country. And figuring out what things you do well and what things you'd like some help on, I think, is another good way to be ready.
Great. Next question here is from Manali Parmer, and she says, what was the one thing you missed when you were in space?
I missed my family so much. When I went to space, I had, my son was 10, and I went to space right before Christmas, and I came home at the end of the school year. And in fact, he asked me if I couldn't maybe wait until after Christmas to go to space. And I explained that, I didn't really get to vote in that way. But I missed him, and I missed my husband. And, that's true of your parents. You don't have to be in space to miss your family, to have times that, you're trying to do the things that you think are important, that you have to contribute. And you can't always do them from home. During this time with COVID-19, I've actually been kind of happy to be home a little bit more with my family. And, we really learned a lot about how to live apart, but we're actually learning a lot about how to live together now. But I definitely missed my son and my husband.
Okay.
And my cats. I have 2 cats.
Absolutely. The pets are important.
It's true.
So let's see. The next question I have here for you is, did you ever, so this is from Angie Brown, and she says, did you ever get sick in space, I assume? I heard the Apollo crew got sick and they all got cranky.
That might be two questions. Did you ever get sick and did you ever get cranky? And both, yes. Not real. A lot of us, when we have this fluid shift that happens because gravity is keeping, for you and I and everybody else on the ground, gravity keeps a lot of fluid in our lower body. And as soon as we get up to space, if you see pictures of me in space, you might see sort of my big face, like it's a little bit bigger up there. And that actually can give you a little bit of a headache at first. And so we have some medicines up there, and then we talk with our doctors on the phone and on video, and we make a decision about what kind of medicine we're going to take, just like you would consult with your doctor here. But we do really telemedicine. And so I did actually sometimes take that kind of thing. But in general, we actually have a quarantine before we go to space. So in general, we don't get colds and flus and things up there.
All right.
Yeah.
So that's one of the benefits, I guess. And no. So there's actually a related question about, are there insects in space? Maybe, right?
Now so this depends a little bit on which way you went up to space. Now in the space shuttle, we launch from Florida, and there are mosquitoes in Florida. And there have been times that mosquitoes have gone to space with us. Now, it didn't happen on my missions, but it certainly can happen that way. I mean, they do everything they can to keep all the airflow and everything like that, but we've had a few mosquitoes go to space. But up on my mission, we actually sent on purpose spiders up to space. I'm somebody who likes to go to space because we don't have spiders or snakes. Those are not my favorites. And the Indiana Jones movies, I'm an alien. I'm not very good at that, right? But we brought spiders to space because we wanted to understand, I mean, spiders are architects, they're builders. And when they have all these different messages going to their brains about how to build things, I mean, how do they build things now? And then if they go to space and they don't have gravity, how do they build things differently? And do they know when they sort of shoot their web, how far it's going to go and how it's going to go? And so we brought the spiders up there, and they didn't have names. And so I named them Esmeralda and Gladys. And they were excellent architects. They learned after a while, and they built their webs differently, but always very consistently. It was fascinating.
Great. Okay. Another question here from Melissa Gard, and she asks, when re-entering the atmosphere from space, do you get hot?
We do, actually. I mean, we do everything we can to stay cool, but let's just think about if my fist is the Earth, okay? And we're going around the Earth, we're going 17,500 miles an hour. And now we're going to slow down by 300 miles an hour. Out of 17,500, we're going to slow down like this much, right? And so just a tiny bit, but we do that, and we sort of and we're going around, we fire our engines into the wind. So now we've slowed down just that little bit, and it means that we're going to land on the other side of the Earth. And as we come into the atmosphere, we're running into more and more and more air molecules, busting them apart. That makes that plasma. And it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter, but we've thought ahead. Engineers and scientists have thought ahead. And on the outside of our space station, on the outside of our capsule or our space shuttle, we have thermally protective material. And in the case of the Soyuz, which is the very small, tiny capsule that I came back in from the Russians, it's actually on the bottom. It's on the bottom surface, and it's really thick because it actually burns up. It's getting hot instead of us. And they had to use math to figure out how do we have enough of it, but not to be safe, but not so much that we might actually fall sort of too fast. And I'm actually reminded of this because of the Meteorite Collection. And, I was privileged to go and live in Antarctica for the ANSMET, for the Antarctic Search for Meteorite Expedition. Yeah. And getting to see, this is happening to meteorites too. They're like little space capsules. They come in and getting to see that they melted on the bottom, and they have that little rolled up crust.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly the same idea, actually. So the
So
fusion
different
crust.
disciplines are learning, and that's why I actually love that, you have a school of Earth and space exploration, because, planetary explorers are planetary explorers. And I mean,
That's exactly right.
lessons apply.
So actually, it's just a great segue, because there's a question here from Dana, and she asks, where would you rather go, Moon or Mars, as an explorer?
Well, am I allowed to say both? I'd like to say both, or I would like to end your question with next. And, someone was asking about training, and we have all sorts of different ways that we train. Well, we have essentially a checklist about going to live on Mars. How are we going to get there, and how are we going to live there? And there's things that we need to figure out, and there's different places to figure those things out. Our space station is one of those places. We're doing experiments about how to live and survive in space for a long time. We're testing out recycling of the air, recycling of the water, the bathroom. I mean, when you go to Mars, don't you want to have a bathroom that works and that but our recycling systems and our bathroom, each of those things had to be fixed more than once a month. Does that sound like ready for Mars? I mean, it's not, but that's not like a depressing statement. It's because these things are hard and they're interesting, and we have to figure them out. And it's not because stupid people built them or made bad decisions or didn't spend enough money. It's because they're hard. And so we're learning things on this, and we'll learn things by going to Mars. I would go to any of the above.
That's a great answer. I would do the same. Even though I've got Mars in the backdrop. But
I love seeing Mars like that. It makes it very real to me. And actually, one of my favorite pictures is when, like, the Mars orbiter that is then taking pictures of the surface of Mars, and when it showed that you could see the tracks that the Curiosity rover was making.
I
mean, it
know.
was like watching a movie on Mars, right? I mean, we're getting to see, so I really love that you make it seem like this place we just haven't been yet. Because that's how I felt about space. I always thought there's Earth, and here I am on Earth, and then I'll go to space and it'll be different. When really, it turns out once you get there, you realize that Earth and where we live is just bigger than you thought, and space is a part of it.
Yeah, right. Oh, so here's a question from Mackenzie Richard, and she asks, how long does it take to get to space?
Mackenzie, it depends how you go, but in general, when we're going to low Earth orbit, meaning where we are in the space station, pretty close, right? It takes about 8.5 minutes. If you were going to go to the moon, it'd probably take you about 3 days. And if you're going to go to Mars, now this is really dependent on what kind of an engine you use and when you go, if you go when Mars is close or not, but it's going to be something more like 6 months. That's why we have to have, there's all sorts of people on the team figuring out, how are we going to go to Mars? What kind of propulsion should we use? What if we used a kind of propulsion that didn't use much power but was really slow? Well, that might take too long. So we're making all sorts of, we're exploring all sorts of things like that.
That's great. Here's a question from Audrey, and she asks, is it easier to play the flute in space or on Earth?
Ooh. Well, it's easier not to lose your flute on Earth than it is in space. In terms of playing, I just have like a little whistle. Actually, I was practicing just today, but we'll pretend this is a flute. A whistle, you really just kind of do like this. But think Audrey, if you're a flute player, we think about playing the flute, and it's kind of resting here, and it's resting like on here, and it's resting here. And so it's got these places where we're keeping it in place, but gravity is the fourth place. Right? Kind of steadies it, right? And even the same thing if I was playing the whistle, there's one place here, right? And right, and here. And so you're thinking about where you're setting the flute, but without gravity, we're missing one of our legs of standing. It's like missing a leg from a stool. And so it's a little bit more sort of bobbly around. It moves a little bit more. And I had to get used to doing that. But it was very funny. I put a regular flute has 3 pieces, and I put them, I actually had 3 flutes up there with me, and I put them together when I first got there, and I wrapped each of them in its own colored t-shirt, and I put them in a bag, and it was kind of like a thing of arrows, right? Because I was afraid if I took them apart and put them together, I would lose the pieces, because when they float away, I mean, you might never find them. I looked around one day, I was just working, and then suddenly, like right in, it's a little bit funny with this background, but right in front of me was a pocket knife. Fortunately, closed up, not open, right? And someone had lost that pocket knife like a year and a half beforehand. And suddenly, there it was, because it was in back of something, so we try not to lose things up there.
Good advice. Here's a question from Danette, and she asks, did you have any scary moments in space?
Not exactly scary. You know, we get ready for emergencies, and we practice so many times. And you know, when we're in the space station, we pretend we're on the ground, we're in the simulator. It's kind of like being in a train car, or a couple of them all put together, and we say, okay, you know, we smell smoke. What are we going to do? And people are watching. There's cameras, and we know we're not actually going to die in this pretend fire, but we do know that people are watching, and we're getting graded, just like your teachers grade you. And we feel a responsibility to be really practice hard and to do our job really well. And that part makes me nervous. And so then I find out, when I'm nervous, I find out what mistakes I'm likely to make. Read the directions. Okay, now I'm going to do this and this and this. I have a tendency to skip steps sometimes. So my crewmates and I talked about that, and they helped me make sure I don't skip steps. And then I have another crewmate that maybe goes, I mean, so we all have different things that we do well. And so we practice. So I wouldn't say that it's scary, but it's interesting when we have to really do our jobs. And sometimes the alarms would go off, and my first thought is, we know how to do that.
Right. Hey, so we're actually approaching the top of the hour again. We've got maybe another 3 minutes before before we end, but I'll ask you maybe a couple more questions.
I'll go fast.
Yeah. So the one's from Miles, and he asks, "What is your favorite view looking down on Earth when you were in the space station?"
My favorite view looking down, home, which for me was Massachusetts.
Great. Let's see. What is space like? And this is from Maya. Is it cold and dark? Is it colorful, beautiful? Are there rocks and debris whizzing by the spacecraft?
Maya, I think it's wonderful. You know, we love to look out at night and see the stars, and they look kind of deeper than they look, I think, down here. But at the same time, we're not that much closer than you are. But it's really just like when you go and you sit on a rock somewhere and you're the only one there, and you just feel kind of closer to the desert or to wherever you are. And that's how I felt. I just felt kind of closer to space, and it was really wonderful.
That's great. So one last question, because it's 1 minute before, and the question is, how does exploring benefit people on Earth? I think it's a great question to end with.
So many of the things that we learn, you know, how to grow plants in places where it's hard to grow them, how to understand a lot about our bodies. I mean, people really want to know for space, and so they think of all these different experiments. And it turns out that these experiments and the way we actually understand people's bodies and the equipment that we monitor with, and the you know, the kinds of medical things, the devices that are invented to go to space, turn out to be so useful down here on Earth that it makes me really proud to be part of something where it's important for space, but it's also important for Earth. And in a medical sense, I did a lot of osteoporosis experiments up there, because we lose our bone density if we don't do something. And we experimented with what kinds of things could we do. And because it happens so fast to us, it's easier to measure, which is really cool for scientists. And so we got to learn, you know, that exercise really, really helps us maintain our bone mass. So I hope everybody is exercising during this time of being in quarantine. And so, you know, we learned a lot about medicine that meant a lot to me, and a lot about science, which meant a lot to me too. And we don't necessarily know what all the results will be. We're still figuring them out, but it's very exciting to be a part of it.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Cady. You know, we had something like 327 questions that came in, and so yeah, I'm sorry if we didn't get to some of the questions. We had just so many, and we had already something like 200 questions that came ahead of time. So really appreciate the fact that you took the time, Cady, to answer some of the questions, and I hope that this was a fun event for families of our staff and faculty in particular, and hopefully it was a bit of a time for adults and kids to get together and actually you know, have a little bit of fun together. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, Cady. Do you want to say a few words before we close here?
Well, I just want to say it was really fun for me, and you know, hearing about all the questions. I mean, it's, you know, to me, it makes me just feel like the world is going to be okay if you are asking questions. I mean, you know, look at the questions that you asked and other people asked, and realize, I mean, there was a ton of good questions, and think about what does it mean about you, about what you're curious about what's important to you, about what you wonder about, because those things are so important. And thinking about questions and then finding the answers, I mean, that's what being a learner is all about. It's what your parents do, whether they're faculty or staff. We're all about just kind of learning about where we are and where else we could go. So I'm really happy there were so many questions. Thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm sorry?
I can't wait to see everybody in person.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you everybody for joining us. There were, you know, about 250 or so people with us. So amazing event. And thank you so much, Cady.
Thanks. And thanks, Taryn, for setting it up, and the Interplanetary Initiative for setting it up. It really was so helpful.
Yeah, no, thanks very much to Taryn and the Interplanetary Initiative to help support this event as well. Thank you.